21st September, part 2 of recording with Sanans at Inayat.
Swadi and Sanam.
Swadi and Sanan, okay, I'm
okay.
corrected. And we are, up to now we have talked about their life in Shimla and Rohdu and Spiti, and now today we'll see where they move. So Sananji and Swadi madam, you were last in Spiti. Ab kya ho raha hai? Bataiye. Now where else? So which was this year?
When we have to talk about our farewell.
Yes. So which was this year now first?
1987 we moved out of Spiti. 85 to 87.
Okay. 87 which months?
October we moved out.
Because for me it's relevant because I was there in June.
Yeah. We moved out in October. We had gone in August 85 and we moved out in October 87.
We were prepared to stay another
We were prepared
winter.
to stay that winter.
So what was your farewell?
No, actually that was in Kinnaur, not in Spiti.
So you were prepared to stay another, and then what
winter in
happened?
Spiti, and they suddenly posted me, finally
Back
posted
to
me
Shimla.
out to Shimla. So we came, and but we maintained our links. And Kinnaur we always had links because we passed through Kinnaur to go to Spiti. And then in 1990, Harish Bhai, I went with Yusuf and Anand, and we did the first descent of the Spiti River by raft.
Okay, from where to where?
We put in the rafts in Kaza and we came to Hurli.
Whatever.
And no one had been on
No boat had ever been
Wow.
put on the river till then. So we put these rafts in. It was quite exciting.
Yeah.
But of course, I read only when I was actually rafting that water is so cold that it will take about 4 minutes to
die.
You
If
get
you
to
fall
be
in
in
hypothermia.
hypothermia in 4 minutes, and if you wear the wetsuit, maybe you'll last 10.
No, quick and
And all the other fellows were bachelors. I had 2 children.
And a
I was,
wife.
Yeah. And so it was quite exciting. We went down and then we went climbing in Jambu Glacier from there straight.
Okay, you were there in that trip. I read about
Yes. I went up to advanced base camp and
With her
right up to the ice fall. Then I didn't want to climb the ice fall.
Now you got 2 children, so you have to be careful.
Besides, I don't think I had the skills.
Yeah.
These,
Who others were coming? Who were other mountaineers from India? The Ramesh Bhattacharya used to come quite often.
Rumesh used to come earlier. I think he was already, he was too old to come up in those areas by the time I was there. And only these young people. Yusuf and all gang came, there were some other.
Yusuf's brother, Salman.
But now they don't come, Yusuf and come.
No, he's also now. 90s he went to Gaya twice. And
Yeah. So you came to Shimla and you had a farewell. What was the
Yeah.
special about that farewell
No,
party?
no. Later.
She's talking about our Kinnaur fair.
Oh, okay.
Spiti, of course, we had normal farewell out of Spiti. Came, went. Then I got posted to Kinnaur in 1990.
How did that happen?
So
You
you
made it
spent 3
happen
years
or?
in Shimla.
Huh?
You spent 3 years in
We
Shimla.
spent 3 years.
Jayati was born.
Yeah, we spent 3 years here.
What were you doing that time? Any special government position?
I was making the state government's budgets.
Oh, that's when you were Honorable Finance Minister.
No. yeah, I was a deputy secretary of
In
finance.
finance.
Joint secretary of finance.
And
Yeah, before that I was making the state's case for the finance commission, the ninth finance commission. So all that kind of stuff. It was quite drab and dry stuff, figures and everything. And then yes, being posted to Kinnaur was interesting because I was all my colleagues who were with me were getting posted to the districts and as deputy commissioners, collectors, which is a very sought after job in the civil service.
Is it? I thought the people would be more keen to stay in Shimla.
No. Everybody wants to go to the districts. It's where you are
Kingpin.
You're king of the district. No?
And so when IS
I wasn't
officers
getting posted.
retire, that's all they talk about. As if they did nothing else before and after. Then I was DC.
I wasn't getting posted. All the others got posted to big districts, Shimla, Mandi, and Solan. So then I went and asked the bosses that why no district for me. So I didn't realize that the name of the game is that you have to, approach the politicians and they decide where you go. I didn't understand these things. So I went to my civil service bosses and said, I also want to go to a district. So they said, now you have two choices. You can go to Kinnaur or you can go to Una. Una district is next to Punjab. It goes to 42 degrees in summer. So I said, there is no choice. I will go to Kinnaur. But even then it took 6 months.
6 months for
The posting to come. Because the chief secretary felt that the existing DC has not stayed long enough, and that fellow wanted to get out, but the chief secretary said, no, I want him to stay a little longer. Some kind of rubbish. Anyway, finally I got posted. We went in
October.
November.
Deepak's
I
parents
joined
came
on Mrs.
to
Gandhi's
stay with the children, and Deepak and I went to Kalpa,
Yeah.
and we entered the house, and it was like a homecoming.
Wow.
I just went down on my knees and kissed the ground. I said, well, this is what I wanted. Not that I knew about it all my life, but from the time it is. And it was barren. All the leaves were falling.
Yeah, it was November. It was cold. It snowed while we were
Oh
there.
yeah. So it was seriously cold. Yeah. But it was like complete happiness to be there.
We were staying in the circuit house.
It
and
really
it snowed.
was there. No, Vivek wasn't there, just you.
We were just two of us, and it snowed one day, and we were heating wood and coal, and but it was very beautiful.
Stunning.
That was a wonderful 3
And
years
the
of our life.
roads were beautiful. Unlike now, you've seen the roads then.
Yeah.
The roads were amazing. You could do from DC Kothi Kalpa to Kasumti Shimla in 6.5 hours?
Oh,
The seven.
Yeah.
Seven.
No, including a stop.
so Sarita, I'm going to do one thing on my table. There is another small phone line. We'll get that. Yeah. So then
So we spent wonderful 3 years there and walked a lot and trekked a lot, and
And the children loved it.
we went to all the remote villages, the Chikkus and Charam and Kunu,
so take a charge in what you have to do. You have to understand Kinnauri people,
Yeah.
language, and what is the administration you have to start with.
What was the administrative jobs and position? Well, the DC in these tribal districts is in charge of all departments. There is no bifurcation. So you are sort of head of department for all the departments. So in a sense, you are supposed to know about everything which is happening.
IPH, PW,
Whether it is
health,
irrigation or public health or water supply or sanitation or
Roads.
education or health or roads, you're supposed to take stock of everything and know everything and push everything. So it was interesting to go to and try. So I think it was very enjoyable to go to all the villages and listen to people and understand what they really wanted and what they needed. And but in Kinnaur and Spiti, people are just happy if you visit. There's not so much about what we want and all. It's just that, oh, you've come, that's so wonderful. And then there's dance and everybody dances and there's some drinking and there's...
And that's when you got involved with healthcare.
No, I worked in Spiti. I was working earlier too, but in Spiti one would walk around when he went and chat with the young women and find out about what was happening, how they had their babies, what they did for contraception. And so that was when we were in Spiti. But the interesting part, to come back to Kinnaur, was that after Nalini Jayal, who was the first...
Nalini Jayal, which years he was here?
was the
1960 to 67.
Okay.
He was the first deputy commissioner of Kinnaur. The district was created in 1960. Yeah.
So the story went that Nalini Jayal walked everywhere, to every village. And then after him, people used to say that Deepak is the only other DC who's visited even the littlest of hamlets and really...
Yeah, it was...
Yeah.
But that you're doing it after your interest or because it was...
No, it was...
Do the district good?
Yeah, it was a mixture, meaning it's good to go and take stock in every place about what's happening and what are things like. And I loved it. I enjoyed the walking. So it was a sort of a happy combination of both, because otherwise people won't go, because it's, I mean, either you like walking or you don't. And in these remote hills, as you know well, if you don't like walking, as one of my officers said, if I have a choice, I would go from the
My
bedroom
bed
to the bathroom
in
by a car. Who wants to
yeah.
walk? Deputy commissioners are not supposed to walk. And he was very upset because I said, you accompany me, and I made him walk 8 kilometers one day. 8 kilometers I thought was a joke. But he was so perturbed by it, and he said, strange deputy commissioner I've got, he feels like walking in the mountains. So all kinds of civil servants get posted in all kinds of places. But Kinnaur, we had more visitors. Kinnaur was more developed than Spiti.
More
It
easily
has,
accessible.
as you will know, that it has more climate variation from sort of rainfall, fairly substantive rainfall and good thick forests in the lower belt to sort of arid Spiti type conditions up in the Tibetan border, and much more amenable to crops, and therefore apple had come earlier, richer belt, people better off. People also were not so locked in as in Spiti traditionally. So the Kinnaura was a wayfarer. The Kinnaura would trade right across to Ladakh and Central Asia, Guge and down, and right down to the plains to Bijnor in Uttar Pradesh. That the sheep would move, and it was. They were a more sort of outgoing people, a more aware people. And
Have you sort of gathered or heard any good stories of trade and travel?
Wonderful
Like,
stories. I
Tibet,
remember.
few of those.
Yeah, I remember reading some good tales about. I mean, in those days when I sat and read, you would read Gerard's account of Kunaur.
Have you read that?
Yes.
And he's wonderful, where he talks about this trader in Thangi village who, without just on his word, and gave him some 100 rupees or something in those days. I mean, and must have been a fortune. But he said these people were wonderful. He just trusted me and just gave me, and they had that money to give so much money. And these are people who traded and understood, whom to trust and whom not to trust, and
Had an innate sort of sense.
so and they would go, as I said, as far as Ladakh. I don't know. I haven't heard of people going to Central Asia, but Ladakh, yes, and Guge, yes, constantly. And
What they would, they'll take goods from here?
they would take basically they would take the local produce, which would be barley. They would take some
Pine nuts,
nyoza, the pine nut. They would take ghee, and they would
salt they bring in, or salt they
salt
take
they
out?
get from Tibet,
Okay.
and they would also get wool from Tibet, and those were horses would come from Chamtham and from the Indus basin also, and they would take these local produce and woven stuff from here. And so there was all this happening all the time, and we sort of learnt a lot more about. Spiti was small, and just as I said, 4,000 people, and Kinnaur was 60,000 people. Kinnaur was part of the old kingdom of Rampur Bushehr. It had a proper sort of organized administration. It had, viziers in different belts who looked after in the old days. And it had some more hierarchy of, linked to the gods of the families, and slightly upper caste families.
But what are the
higher,
traditions? I mean,
lower.
just like Spiti, you said first the monastery, and also what are the linkage between the monasteries here and
Yes, so this was very interesting. If you moved up the Satluj Valley, you found that religion changed. So from this polyglot, multi-gods for each village, Buddhism started increasing. So Buddhism was present even at the bottom of Kinnaur. At the lowest end of Kinnaur also, you would find a Buddhist temple. But the local deities were more important to the local people. And as you moved up the valley, the local deities became less important and Buddhism became more important. It was wonderful to see this. So Kinnaur was this beautiful way of looking at vegetation, culture, religion, everything changing with each ridgeline. With every ridge line, the vegetation would change, become drier, little more arid. And with every ridge line, this religious interface is changing. Features are changing. People are getting more and more, closer to the Tibetan look as you move up the valley. So slowly, it's sort of grading itself. And so weather is also grading itself. More rain down there, and then by the time you hit the uppermost corners of Kinnaur, no rain at all. Zero. Cold desert.
The story was that
Yeah.
people needed an inner line permit to get from Wangtu into Kinnaur, Upper Kinnaur, Babit. The rain clouds also needed
But
an inner
there's a
line
lovely
permit. They
story,
just
about the Satluj and the Baspa
and the Chilgoza.
and the pine nut. So the pine nut is the Chilgoza tree is present only in a certain portion of Kinnaur, central Kinnaur, and neither below nor above. I mean, it extends a little bit, but sort of fades out, and it's not present in the Sangla Valley, the Baspa Valley. So the story is that the Satluj and the Baspa ran a race.
They were in heaven and they
And they,
decided.
and they said whoever wins gets the Chilgoza as a prize. Now the Satluj had a long way to come from upper areas of Western Tibet. And so it was in a hurry and it rushed down. The Baspa had a shorter distance to travel, but it was so pretty. So it became slowly,
Gently through
and
Sangla Valley
imagine,
with-
really enjoying itself. And then suddenly when it reached Rutrang Bridge near Sangla, just below Sangla, where the Baspa just descends very sharply.
Suddenly saw
It
that,
suddenly
oh my
heard
God,
the Satluj on the other side of the ridge.
coming.
And it realized that it was going to lose. So then it rushed headlong down the slopes. But it was too late. The Satluj won. The Satluj won and kept the Chilgoza.
So you only see Chilgoza along the...
So
There was somewhere an article, they find some gold particles in Satluj.
yes, there were some
was that?
stories in the old days that there were some gold panned on the Satluj. What I discovered from the geological center.
Tibet or it was somewhere in Kinnaur, gold pond.
Possibly.
Some people said it came from Tibet, but the GSI did some work and said there is an igneous extrusion in the Kinakailash massif
Purbani ke paas.
near Purbani. There is an igneous extrusion, and there are precious and semi-precious stones in that, and there are mineral deposits
Which some
of
them
value,
which are
but they were
needed,
not sure it's sufficient reserves to be commercially exploitable. So it's never been exploited, but they did some testing, and they do say so. It's possible from there.
But was something found because
Not in
India Today read some article that people were sort of taking out the water, pani, and then
they were panning in the Satluj. There are some stories in the old days, not of late, not at all.
What about school? Did
Our children,
yeah?
yeah,
No, that
our
was-
son.
That was...
Even our daughter
later.
went to school there.
Okay.
But our son went to school
Huh.
there. Yeah, he went to the
But
local.
first, let's go through the other things. of
Yeah.
Kalpa. And the place was, and because we'd been visiting when Vivek Srivastav was DC, Vivek and Radhika, so everyone knew us, So Vivek had this really exuberant, extravagant
When you say
lifestyle.
everyone, you mean
The
Local
local
people around, the
people,
neighbors
and
of
we
the
were
house, the village
friends
people.
with everyone. And Vivek was always a party person and loved getting the locals together to dance and to drink, and dinner was served at some 2 o'clock at night. So they thought, we'd be the same, that these guys will also go wild and have nachu. But unfortunately or fortunately, we weren't.
No, we weren't of the same
We'd
metal.
eat at 7, even there we'd eat at 7. We didn't do much nachu or,
Yeah, we
drinking
didn't,
was
no,
limited.
Drinking was limited. I was always a little more serious about work, I suppose. Unnecessarily.
And the fun stories of the first winter when we moved there, and we moved with both the children, and oh my God, it was so cold and everything was barren, and the winds and the snow, and even though the house was really beautiful, it's a small house, really small, but you don't need a bigger place because when you have in winter no one comes, And in summer when people come, we just spread sheets on the lawn and we sat out and had our lunches. And dinner, we'd all sit out and have a drink. But my happiest time was because no one could say, I'm not eating now. You know, when we had guests beginning early March till end November, non-stop. And if we didn't have someone for a few days, then we'd walk down to the circuit house and see who we could invite. One day we invited this chap because he had big feet and we wanted to know his shoe size, which was some 15.
Size 15.
15?
Size
1
15.
5. Huh?
He was huge. He was an
Angrez,
Angrez.
huh.
He worked on
software and
yeah, very basic, some calculators or something. And he knew nothing else except that. Writing the software for these little sort of computer program for these.
So we've had some, but the
He
fun
was
was
not very
every-
interesting. But I
if I
took him to
said-
Kashigaon.
if I said we have to sit down for dinner at 7, we'll have a drink. After that, people would quietly eat because there's no dhaba outside where they could go and eat, you know. So, and I suppose they were hungry. You know. so there's the sun setting there, and the Kinnar Kailash peaks are all orange, and we finished our dinner in summer especially. And then we'd sit out and maybe have a little fire and have drinks. And yeah, and both the children absolutely
So the
loved it.
house is
Yeah.
no longer a residence for the DC.
Oh,
It's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
It was
It's
considered
become a
too
rest
small
house
now?
now. Yeah, and it was up in Kalpa. The district headquarters when Nalini Jayal founded the district was Kalpa or Chini village, next to Chini village. But then in 1990 they shifted the district headquarters to Rikanchi.
Oh my God, should
Yeah.
I speak with her?
So I continued to live up there. But office was down there. And then one or two DCs after me it changed. And people just...
completely moved down.
yeah, people moved down and people preferred to live down because there was more company, there were more, officials, there were more offices. So people generally preferred living there. I mean, we just much preferred living up there. And so it's changed. It's become a rest house and the house is no longer there.
But that house, I believe, was where Lord Dalhousie had stayed. And
No. That house was built by Nalini Jayal, that small house.
So where
Where the reputation is that Dalhousie used to come in the 1850s was in Chini village because there was no Kalpa then. No, Kalpa is actually a small sort of area
But the temple
of
itself was.
Chini village. No, that's Chini.
That Chini. Oh.
Chini village. I think there was some sensitivity about calling something Chini. And therefore they preferred this calling it Kalpa because Kalpa was just a small area outside Chini village and where they built this house for the DC and they built a small they built the school and all and just called it Kalpa.
Kalpa.
So actually the people really lived in Chini. And that's where Dalhousie used to come. So there's a grave there in the Tehsil even now from the 1850s. Some captain died, an English captain. He's buried there. So that exists even now. It used to be the SDM's residence in the old days when the SDM was in Kalpa. Now the SDM is also in Rikampu.
Because everything is, Kalpa is just not for the tourists now.
Kalpa is more or less for the tourists now.
What about the Hindustan-Tibet road?
Yes.
How did it come and...
Now the
from Shimla-
Hindustan-Tibet road came when the British came. So it started, if the earliest accounts dated starting from Kalka. So they say stages from Kalka to the Tibetan border, to Shipki. And then as the sort of carriage, horse carriage ways came up to Shimla, and then the rail came by 1906 to Shimla. So then they started talking about the HT road beginning from Shimla and going up to Kinnaur. Initially it was just footpaths. There was no real, even a proper bridle path. So in the 19th century, there are even accounts of horses falling off the precipice and rider and horse plunging to their death. There are some sad stories about a young lieutenant going with his bride and she plunging to her death with the horse on the rocky cliffs and all. So because these are really, as you know, these are the Satluj really carves its way through the mighty Himalayan gorge-like. I mean, some of the drops are 1,000 meters plus from the paths, the old paths. So these were tough footpaths. So there are accounts of British travelers being carried on dundies. You know those dundies? They would have this pole, and on either end of the pole, you'd have this sling. So from two sides of the pole, you'd just have a sling, and the traveler would be inside that sort of canvas. Sling, and people would be carrying. Two people would carry and take turns. And this was Begar. You see, the British had arrangements whereby the local princes and the local people had to therefore provide Begar services, which could be, which could not be refused. So when a traveler wanted this,
What is called Begar?
Begar is actually forced labor.
Okay, forced labor.
So it's forced labor. You could not refuse. You couldn't say, I won't carry you. The village had to contribute the labor for carrying those people who wanted to travel in this. So there was a French writer, Victor Jacquemont, who came, and he's written he died very young, in his 30s, but he's written a very fascinating account of his journey up, as a number of people. But so they would go on dundies on these narrow paths or on horses, but horses could be dangerous, as I said, you could fall. And it was in the 1930s that they first laid a proper broad bridle path through the gorges of the Satluj. And that is what we refer to nowadays as the HT road. Normally people, when they say the old HT road, you refer to that 1930s alignment, which was not motorable, but it was wide. You could have two horses go together on it, and it was carved out high up the mountain, but very beautiful. So what happened was that the original path would take you from Shimla through this belt of Kufri, Fagu, Thiog, Narkanda, and then it would go Kotgarh, and then it would go into Dharanghati from Kotgarh, and then come out in Sarhan, and then from Sarhan it would go into Kinnaur. But now when we refer to it normally, we start from Sarhan. Yes, because the upper paths are no longer really usable short of Sarhan. There are some treks, but very few people really go. And the main road is now below, lower down, closer to the Satluj. So from Sarhan, the old 1930s alignment is sort of kept alive and is a nice sort of walking route. You can still walk on it, and it's quite a nice walk.
And Suman Dubey's father was with the border roads, and he actually has some films from that time when they made that road.
Oh, wow.
And how people hung with ropes.
There, even in public relations has those films. With people hanging by ropes
and
then drilling and then placing the dynamite for blasting the rock.
And that whole Tranda Dhank and all the most beautiful part.
That's the 1960s alignment. Post the Indo-Chinese War.
So when the stories go, one has heard that when Nalini Jayar also used to travel there, the driver always traveled with a plank. And he would, which was the measurement of the distance between the width of the two wheels and beyond. And if he thought his judgment wasn't correct enough and he thought the road was too narrow, then he would sort of go and measure it with the plank, or put the plank in such a way that the car.
So in 1962, when the conflict took place, the Chinese conflict.
Did anything happen in Kinnaur?
Nothing happened here.
Kaurik or anywhere?
But they did use the 1930s alignment, the old HT road alignment. They did things with it, and they sent 1-ton trucks all the way to Poo on that.
On that?
Why Kaurik?
No, up to Poo.
Kaurik is above.
Kaurik is very far.
The trucks came above from Kaurik?
No, from here, up the Satluj Valley.
They
They went up to Poo 1-ton trucks. Only, that was the only thing which could go up, and they sort of did things with the road little, the same old HT alignment. So even now when the lower road gets blocked, they do things with the old HT alignment and somehow get vehicles, small vehicles to go on it.
Was there any talk of establishing railway lines from along the Satluj till Tibet?
No, not
Because
till
in between,
now.
I had a telephone call years before by somebody from Pune engineers and
Up to Rampur, there has been discussion
yeah,
to bring it up the
along
Satluj
the
Valley.
river, and that water will generate electricity there, so electric lines will come and all that. And then this guy was talking, and it's phoning from Pune, so he was spending some money. And then finally, when he mentioned, Sharad Pawar is the defense minister, is interested, I said, thank you.
But now they are
Pawar
talking
lobby
about
was the
they are talking about a railway line to Leh via Manali.
Ah,
That is a conversation which is
tunnel.
taking place
through the tunnel.
by tunnels. Yeah.
Did you see the Beijing to Lhasa railway line?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of pictures of it.
You didn't see
haven't
it
gone
when
it.
you went to Lhasa.
That time it was not ready.
I saw it on the Beijing side when we went to Beijing.
Yeah.
So there was no talk of railways along the.
No, there has only been talk of and very preliminary talk of a railway line up to Rampur also, but that is also we still don't have a railway line
Up to Himachal.
into up the Satluj Valley at all from beyond Nangal.
Actually, where does this Satluj goes down to Nangal?
Yeah.
I mean, say Rampur, if you don't climb to Shimla, you go straight.
It's
along
right
the-
here, across this mountain here. On the other side is the Satluj Valley. It's
So
just
you
going
go
down.
On the
this-
other
going
side
along
of
the Satluj.
Shali.
So then, where will you?
Where will you emerge in the plains?
Yes.
At Nangal.
Nangal, okay. So why that alignment is not used for motorable driving also?
It is used for the Manali side. Everybody uses it for going to Manali.
Not for the Kinnaur side.
Like from the Kinnaur, you want to go to Nangal. That road.
Yes, there is a road, but it's not that great. But it's longer. People won't use that.
Okay, why Shimla is quicker?
Yes, it's quicker. It's a wider road. It's a better road. But there is a road now.
But there was no.
But there are now two dams. No? There is the Gobind Sagar Dam above Nangal,
Ah.
right? And now we have this coal dam
Right here.
right here on the Satluj.
Where
Which is-
Tattapani used to be.
Tattapani is now below water.
Okay.
So there is a coal dam which is made for basically it stops the silt from flowing into the Gobind Sagar. So it is meant to have a lifespan of just 25 years, but it's generating 800 megawatts while it's there.
So all these projects were coming around your time. The Jakri.
Nathpa Jakri had started. It had just started in that period. Yeah, 1989. this
But what is it exactly? I mean, the running dam means what? The water goes inside the rocks and comes
Yes,
out, or what?
when they say run of the river hydro project, they mean that you divert the water into a tunnel. So the tunnel has a very sort of gentle gradient, and the river is moving down very fast. So after a certain distance, there's a big gap between the tunnel height and the river. So that creates the head
Drop,
for
the head.
generating electricity, and then you just drop it to the turbines.
And everything, turbines, everything inside the rocks.
Yes, what they are doing increasingly, they make the powerhouse inside the mountain. So the
Which
the
they did
penstocks
long
drop
ago with
inside.
Baba also.
Yeah, it is.
had a-
So you drop the
Then why
penstock.
all- because of security reason or because of some other thing?
No, I think it's just
practical,
it's
yeah.
practical. It's more economical to just do that rather
Along
than.
India, rock and make a city
Well,
inside.
It's no city. No, they don't make a city. It's just a powerhouse.
People have to stay there. But then,
No, they just come in ships.
Oh, okay.
So it
It's
can
just
be
a
like
powerhouse.
3
So,
stories high.
It is just 3-4 stories high, one big cavern, and which has the turbines and which has a control room and
All
everything.
that under a
Yeah,
rock face.
Yeah, but
Yes.
they're digging 20-30
Yeah.
kilometer tunnels also now for the water.
This Nathpa Jakri is 28 kilometer.
And
tunnel.
given how delicate the whole Himalayas are, I mean now
It can
technology
be
is
civilized.
improving,
Now they are using a lot of tunnel boring machines.
which
They don't blast so much. They don't
pull out and throw out. But it still destabilizes I mean, you can see when you're driving cracks below villages and
But it still
constant
surprises me that we've
landslides.
gone so ahead with tunneling technology for hydropower, but we haven't used it for roads. Yeah.
Why is that? I was going to ask you.
It's strange. I don't know what is the mental block, and we are taking so long. This Rohtang tunnel is now projected to be completed only in 2019. You know, and the original completion date was 14.
14 years.
Now it says 19. So we seem to be taking very long, and it's only a 9-kilometer tunnel compared to the 28-kilometer tunnels and things which we have made, 22, 28. We have a number of these.
But that tunnel will come to Lahore, but not.
That will go into
Will
Lahore.
it go to Leh also ultimately by other tunnels? Barabacha ke andar bhi tunnel?
Not yet.
अभी
There's no
कोई
proposal
ये
yet.
नहीं है.
Not yet. There's no proposal yet. Only I think if there's a rail proposal, then these things will happen.
Yeah, but let them get this tunnel through first.
So Kinnaur was, it was this fascinating mix. And was it changing? It was changing even before our eyes, and it has changed
Oh, yeah.
quite a bit over
And
time.
you know,
That was
in-
going to ask him because you were at a very important period when the old was just
Yes.
being changed by the new. And
Yeah, the
everything
inner line
about
was
it.
abolished when we were there for
Oh,
Indians.
okay.
For the first time, His Holiness was coming for a Kal Chakra to Kalpa.
And that's why you are sort of you
just
witnessed
at
the
that
old and the
time,
new.
they removed the
The inner line
inner
was
line.
removed.
And there was such a sweet story. The lamas, of course, knew about his coming and had made preparation. But there's this local Devi called Kothi Devi, who's supposed to be very powerful. And even Deepak and I, because our friends there say, you must, if you come, you must go and do Namaste there. And Deepak, even though he doesn't believe, will still go there and, sort of we pay our
Where is this
respect.
Devi located?
Koti.
near-
okay.
Just above Rikangpyo.
Yeah.
And
Chandika.
so, Chandika. So the sweet story is that near Karcham, there's this little stream that comes down, and there's a bridge on it. And His Holiness was supposed to come, and the bridge got washed off. And he was supposed to come the next morning, and this happened early in the morning or something. And they tried, the army, everyone tried to get that bridge up because he was supposed to come. And then it just wasn't working. Then someone, sort of the local pujari said, or whatever, told the lamas कि कोठी देवी को बुलाया नहीं या उनसे पूछा नहीं आपने कि can His Holiness come. So then the lamas went to Kothi Devi and asked her, and when she said yes, that's the story. And
Then the weather cleared and they could work on the bridge
they put
and
a
they could
bridge,
fix
and His
it.
Holiness.
Because the Kal Chakra was being held right next to Chandika's, Koti Devi's, temple, very close, within a few hundred meters. And these people hadn't even bothered to go and
Or invite her or take her permission.
or
or-
anything.
yeah.
How dare they?
So after that, even I'm happy to go and meet her and say Ram Ram.
So she
when-
still reigns supreme.
She
Yeah,
still
she's
reigns.
awesome.
It's like the last time Deepak, there was Deepak, this chap who was Deepak's gunman, his wife died after a prolonged thing, cancer. So we went down just for a day, and people were saying कि कोठी देवी को मिल के जाओ, and Deepak said, should we? And I said, नहीं, आज नहीं. And you won't believe it, we just, spent that night, met Raju in
We
the
just
morning.
spent the night and came.
And drove back without meeting Kothi Devi, and we crossed this one point, Urni Dhang. And after that, the road came down and hasn't opened.
It hasn't
today.
opened.
Today.
May 17th, 2014.
It was after Sujay's wedding.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it hasn't opened today.
Hasn't opened today.
We just made it. And if it's
There
talked
are
to
many,
me,
so I believe Kinnaur has got many legends like this, and
oh yeah, oh different, oh.
Yeah, it has a lot of stories
So
of
many
spirits and devis
ghosts
and
and,
devtas
yeah.
and
And
their battles
And
and
the
their
story of the one is the shivling on this side, on the other side is the Muranka Phual, Raldanka Phual, who is he? What is it
Muran
called?
का फूल दूसरी तरफ है.
हाँ, पर कल्पा से दिखता है. Deepak will clarify. I'll tell you the more interesting
You
bits.
can tell the story.
There was Shiv and Parvati were in their heavenly coitus up there, and this man Phual means a shepherd. So the shepherd was around and he saw them both. So the story goes that he was turned into a piece of rock who still stands. You can see one side is the Shivlinga and the Kinakailash, and this side is this little rock which sticks out, which is meant to be a human being turned into a. So they're very interesting. There's so much. Then our neighbor who we had known when Vivek was DC, and Vivek and Radhika were staying there, and we'd visit from Kalpa, there was this old lady. who had actually physically put in, guard her orchard, planted her trees, worked, put up a house. Now she's like 100. Huh? And we always called her Amma. And once she told me, I was talking about Delhi, and so she said, मैं भी दिल्ली गई थी, हाँ. She said, अम्मा कब गए थे? वो गंदी महात्मा को गोली लगी थी ना, तब मैं दिल्ली में थी. You know, but it took me a couple of seconds to figure out who Gandhi Mahatma, you know, and Mahatma Gandhi.
Actually.
Gandhi Mahatma ko goli. But what an amazing woman. I mean, she taught us so much. Because we got after them, so they converted their little house into a guest house when His Holiness was coming. And after that...
today, that's their prime source of income. Is
and
the hotel they built there.
Amma,
Octong
just
in
above DC Koti, above the old DC
Kalpaya,
Koti.
Octong.
And Amma used to, I mean, it was a constant place for me and the children to sort of go and hang out, you know. There's another story about her daughter-in-law, which is quite exciting. So Amma, we used to go, and then she had this young foreigner, I don't know where he was from, Canada, Australia, who stayed with her for 3-4 months, ate their food and everything, and paid for 2 months or something, and then told her ki हाँ अब पैसे आएंगे post office से, I'm going to check, and he never came back. So I said, अम्मा बताओ, you know, बोल के उसको रोक लेते हैं वहाँ वांगटू पे, and we'll get him back. She said, ये पिछले जन्म का देना है मेरा, मैंने नहीं उसको कुछ करना. She was so much at peace, you know, about this man who had sort of ripped her off and gone on. So they're rich in heart. These people, the Kinwaras were, I mean, so generous, even more so. Things have changed now, they become smarter. But when Radhika and Vivek were there, and even while we were there, they'd call you in, they'd feed you, they'd, you know, sort of...
Kinnaur has not been through hardship because people don't have a generous spirit if they've gone through a very hard...
I don't know, can you say that? I mean, there are times when people who've been through hard times would be willing to share their last roti
hard
with
times,
you.
But if it's a...
Even Kinnaur, like Spiti, had its own form of social organization to keep population in check and ensure that even if you live frugally, you're never deprived.
Never
So
hungry, always warm.
But that's what gives
so
you
like
the-
Spiti had, as we were telling you, primogeniture, where only the oldest got married. Kinnaur had polyandry, sorry. not
Polyandry. So like
Polyandry.
Tibet.
Like Tibet, parts of Tibet, all our hills were polyandrous actually, a lot of our hills. And Kinnaur epitomized that. And even in the 1980s when we went
were
there,
there,
even my driver had a polyandrous marriage. I mean, and it was common.
So 5 or more or less?
No,
No,
no.
depends
it
on the
would
number of
depend, and
brothers.
it would be variable. For example, Sher Singh and his older brother had a common marriage, and one brother didn't.
Okay.
So
Or two
it
brothers
all
did.
began like Sher Singh's wife, who was a friend of mine, and we could sit and chat. And I said, "How does it happen?" So she said, "I was asked to marry Karam Singh,
The older one.
oldest brother." And so she married him. And then after a while, her mother-in-law said, "Ab Sheru bhi bada ho gaya hai, uske saath bhi." So she accepted it. So she was sort of living with Sher Singh, and she talked about how she would know whose child, I mean, the children that she bore, who had fathered that particular child. And I said, you know, it can be nice because you
How
fight
do the
with them.
brothers, I mean, how do...
What are their...
The male
See,
accepted
one-
this. Sheru and Karamchand both
That
accepted.
is a part,
Yeah,
I mean,
that was their culture.
tradition.
That
their
was their culture. They could be, as you said, more than 2. It could be 4 brothers.
In this case, they were...
And it sort of made sense, one brother would be a trader, would be, one of the brothers would be going to trade, one would be with the flocks.
flocks.
And I mean, at any given moment, there might be only one brother in the house.
And
You
if
know,
they're
there would
not-
There is some ceremony to
No,
recognize
no.
it, so it's just...
It's
kept
just,
on the
I
island.
asked
They would
her,
be
I said, what did
one
you do?
marriage.
She said, yeah, one day when Karam Singh wasn't there, then Sheruk. So there's no formal ceremony. as
No,
such.
the ceremony is only one.
But the lady accepts it. The lady
Yeah.
also
Yeah,
kept
because
in
she's
picture.
grown up
She's
seeing
not
it.
forced to.
No.
They've all grown up seeing it.
Seeing
It was
it,
part
so-
of their culture.
Yeah, so it wasn't
not,
unusual.
And land and wealth passes then through.
So
one-
that's what. So it limits the number of children, and
Yeah.
therefore the subdivisions become less, and
And the
population
children-
is controlled.
And the children will call the oldest brother Bade Bapu, then,
Chota
whatever.
Bapu and all,
Yeah, so
Yeah, everyone's a Bapu. So all chachas are Bapu in
it's like
Kinnaur.
Deepak gets called Bapu. I get called Avni, which means Masi, and Deepak gets called Bapu. You know,
Because
so-
there's no chacha, they're all Bapus. They're all fathers. So yeah, it's a dying situation now. I
people are-
mean, it's unusual to find it today.
Oh, it is not. It doesn't happen anymore.
Not at all.
But now, but I mean, legally also people would object.
No, there's no legal
No,
because tribal law
Supersedes,
I mean, this is tribal
But it
custom.
is so tribal laws are.
Tribal custom under the constitution. It has primacy.
So why is it kind of disappearing?
Sanskritization, it's people, it's ideas from below. It's also changing. I mean, people are no longer going off with the shepherd. You know, Kinnaur, the shepherd business is more or less over. The whole long distance transhumance of flocks moving from the alpine pasture to the plains, which would take, months. It's finished. I mean, it's down to, decimal percentages it's down to a few percent. So 5% of what it used to be.
But now, what future there would be no shepherds roaming around. But then, how do you get meat and everything? Is there
No, so
government
then keep the small flocks there, and most of the meat which is sold in the hills, by the way, is all Rajasthan goats.
farm? Okay.
only
It's not
for
virtual.
special occasions, weddings, sacrifices at
In
various
this part
temples.
especially, because the flock culture is really down in this part.
And then
It's still there on the
what
Vermont
happens
side.
to all that side.
You'll see people still dying.
Dying,
No,
the
taklis,
reason-
people sort of spinning, carding,
Yarn.
wool,
Gone.
and making dhoru,
Virtually
making
finished.
shawls.
Virtually finished.
No, the government has some centers.
No,
where they
that
treat-
with
the
the spindle and
takli,
walking with the
walking.
takli.
It was
That's
so
virtually over. Then
interesting.
you would
One
earlier
wooden,
just-
stick, and they'd have just rough, uncarded wool in their bag.
Clothing's
And then
changed
they-
completely. I didn't talk about it as for Spiti, but even for Kinnaur. Clothing completely changed. So even when we were there, you could still find the old clothes, some
Doru,
people, older people wearing them, and the old
Even the
traditional
young
woolen.
people.
Yeah, to some
Yeah.
extent. Just don't see it anymore.
So what has come up?
So for example,
the
women,
Punjab.
Dodu you don't see now.
Except
Virtually
for
some older women or on some festive occasion.
Otherwise, you'd see
ceremonial
all the,
occasion, women
you've
will
seen
wear
a
that
doru,
blanket
you've
like
seen
doru.
Yeah.
pictures.
Now you don't see it. They always salwar kameez, they wear jeans now. All the young women are in jeans now.
So it's
But,
denim and fleece reign supreme.
At one
Huh?
level,
Denim and fleece.
yeah. And,
Denim and fleece.
and
And
at
these
one-
padded jackets, which are the big norm now.
At what was I going to say? At one level, there is a resurgence in local food. I mean, initially it was like really hip if you're getting married to serve saag paneer and whatever.
It still gets served.
Punjabi food, but now people are realizing also the value of their local food, of ogla and thapra.
Yeah, but it's so
and-
much more effort to do that.
Yeah, and making.
So, so it's much,
Making those,
Yeah. So it's only on festive, special occasions.
Yeah.
Nobody really does. Food has changed. Food has changed enormously, both Spiti and in Kinnaur. I mean, the old foods are just for ceremonial
When we were
occasions.
in Spiti, what was most popular was something called Maggi Thuppa, which means Maggi noodles. So it was like Maggi Thuppa.
You
Maggi
can
Thuppa.
imagine even in 1993 when we were in Kinnaur, I think I ate dupti maybe twice. Dupti is this chutney they would make with the apricot kernel
The
and
apricot,
wild
the
apricot
kernel,
that the kernel, not the wild
It's
apricot, the
sweet,
chili.
not-
So then you would grind it and that would remove the bitterness, and then you would mix it with the
whatever,
with
pudina.
and stuff, and then you make a chutney. Hardly anyone
Or
does that
with
anymore.
apricots.
Or apricot.
Kacha.
Punting. Nobody makes punting anymore.
So all the local
So-
food is dying out.
dying.
But there is a restaurant now in PO which actually sells.
Yeah, so
Local
it's a
food.
ceremonial special thing.
it's
It's not like
exoticized
every
rather
day.
than-
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not
it's,
quotidian, it's exoticized.
it's not an
I know.
everyday occasion at all. Finished. You can't go to someone's house and expect that they will give you some traditional food. They'll give you rice and dal and
So
roti.
was your job result oriented for success, or how do you measure success in your job, and was your period there successful in your eyes?
There are different levels at which you can look at success in jobs like this. See, if you look at in terms of, say, physical creation of physical assets or things, then there would be a certain number of things which would get created in a certain time period of time, and you could expedite a few things and wouldn't happen. But for me, always the problem in India has been that, especially for a state like ours, that government's policy is not really, doesn't send out the right incentives for people to really make sustainable change happen, and sustainable positive things happen. They don't really. The government employees don't have the right incentives for that.
So give me a concrete example.
So, for example, the funding comes, say, for a water supply scheme, or say an irrigation scheme. The funding is coming for putting in place the scheme, but it's money coming from a budget which says scheme can be built. So you are being measured for that have you spent the budget, have you made the scheme. Whether that scheme is used by anybody, whether the water really reaches a field, and is anyone really maintaining it later, is inconsequential. And same, so that kind of incentives are bad. So those are true in India as a whole. So that means the really delivering services is not important. Delivering assets has become important. So that sadly I can't afford. I mean, I would never measure my job in those terms. So for me, the measurement was that, in a sense, what are people really looking for when you are, as head of a district administration in a remote area? I think more than anything else, they just want some understanding. Is someone understanding what they live with, what is really bothering them at that moment? Can it be solved in what are long-term, medium-term, short-term issues, and can you really sort of address at least the short-term issues immediately and get on with it? So I think, to an extent, if you just listen, a lot of these things do get addressed. So simple things like, kerosene nahi mil raha hai, gas is not reaching, or school needs more rooms and the rooms are not being built. You could always address those if you, went there to the spot, prioritized properly, and made sure that the budgets flowed in the right way. Yeah, to that extent, it was fun, and I think, it was successful. But from a policy angle, yes, these more senior jobs in government are more important, not the collector's job in that sense. And I have certainly enjoyed those more, the more senior jobs. I mean, I enjoyed those jobs in Kinnaur from a walking angle, from meeting friends and making friends for life, and really beautiful places. But from a pure work angle, I think my jobs later in life were more important than earlier.
And actually, when you became senior. Then now, what about this old travel? Where did Kim reach? Up to what point? Rudyard Kipling's Kim came to Kinnaur, Hindustan Tibet route. Up to what point he reached?
Well, we don't know. We assume that Kim came to Kalpa, to Chini.
Yes. It's a,
Yeah, that's what we assume, that after crossing Lankaga or Chotkara, and somehow Kim made his way to the lady of what was her name? The lady of Shamba. What was she called? Whom he meets. I forget the name now.
Huri Babu and all.
Uh,
Achha, and then what about Somode Koros? Did you see any of his things?
I went to Kanam.
Kanam, you
Yes,
saw any of
I've been to Kanam
remains
and
and
the
all
old
that?
library where he worked for 6 years, and it still exists. The building is still there.
They've all been preserved and looked after.
Well, it's a family temple, so it's not. So to the
And
extent
they
the family
realize
is
the
looking
value
after,
of
yeah.
it.
So Shomada Kurosh is remembered, yeah. And There is
And what about any other early travelers came from Tibet or?
well, I told you about Yakmo, and
Yeah.
there was
The
there were a number of people.
Gerard
Moorcroft also
brothers,
came to Kaza, but it was Spiti.
Almost everybody has passed.
Trebek and Moorcroft, yeah.
Didn't Rorik also come on the same?
Not to Kinnaur, but
He
onto
didn't?
the Spiti side maybe.
Spiti he did.
He probably did.
Or maybe
what
up
is
to
the-
Lahore and not
Svetislav,
into.
I mean the older one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
What was the murder of Spider and that?
Yes, in Tabo.
So, is there any records exist of that? Did you see anything?
No, there's nothing. You have to tell people today that this is a fact, that this happened there.
They don't recollect. Or
They don't know. They don't know. No.
And in the southern Kinnaur, how was this Hansabeshan? Any legends associated
No,
with it?
no, not much. There's no stories about
Nachar
Hans
and
Patient.
the temples
Hans
of
Patient,
Nachar.
no, nobody talks about Hans Patient there. There is some talk about the waters, the origin, the springs or the streams which flow from the sides of Hans Patient and further nearby. So they are, some of those areas are the origins of some of the Nag temples, Nag Devtas, which are always associated with water. So so even Sapni, Rapang's old Nag Devta has his home somewhere in that belt, and the Bari Nag is up in the Barikanda, in the lake there. So yeah, there are. So for them, it's more sort of with their, as you said, with their deities, the
And
relationship.
the local deities are still more important in most.
In this belt,
In this
belt. As you move up
You
to
said
Upper
both.
Kinnaur, it becomes virtually, local deities are no longer really. Sankritan has written some interesting stuff in Hindi.
Which is why there's so many
Rahul Sankritan, the
Bengalis
Bengalis
who-
go up. So, but his conversation between Chandika, the Devi of Koti, and he has this imaginary conversation between Chandika and the Dabla of Kanam, where Shoma the Korosh did his work. So Kanam really is the last polyglot village, where Buddhism and local God are still sort of balanced. They're sort of balancing act. Beyond Kanam, Buddhism is heavier.
Every year.
And below Kanam, it's a creeping sort of Buddhism, which is becoming more and more important. So Kanam sits
Is
on the
it creeping down?
Buddhism. Oh, that's an interesting question. What is happening is very interesting. So 1961 census recorded religion in this belt
Lord
for
Spiti, I mean,
families,
huh.
right? And it records in villages like Kanam, for example, or areas below Kanam and areas in these villages, almost everybody reported themselves as Buddhist, despite the local gods, but they were reporting themselves as Buddhists.
Why? Was advantage? Any government advantage?
No, I think there was no advantage. It was just that Buddhism was important, and Hinduism wasn't understood. It was either local gods or it was Buddhism.
Buddhism,
So
okay.
everyone said Buddhist.
So there were
There were
really
always
Hindus.
lamas who were consulted for anything. Lamas who were called
And
for
it's
rites
changed.
of
By
passage.
1991, it's changed. All the lower castes are reporting themselves as Hindu. The upper castes are reporting themselves as Buddhist. Buddhism becomes a religion of the upper caste, and the assertion of identity by the lower caste is Hinduism. And fresh gods are being discovered by the lower caste. In this period, I saw new temples being built by lower castes,
Discovered or
meaning being ordained into God,
Formulated.
formulated, temples being built to a new Vishnu. Or as a local god of the lower caste.
Any
So the lower
Christianity-
caste assertion of identity is
Now,
Hinduism.
One has heard reports
Any
of,
Christianity in Kinnaur in your
They
time or now?
not in our time.
but
Not at all.
now one
But of
hears-
course, old times there was the
Yeah.
one family in Poo which was converted by the Moravian missionaries.
their clothes you've seen in Pudip and in Lahore, they were similar.
Moravian
And
missionaries
Spiti.
set up missions in
Yeah.
Lahore and in Poo.
They used to go from here via to Tibet.
They tried going into Tibet too, but they never had a mission there. I think they only had missions in Poo and in Kelong.
But now there is no message.
Nothing. There is no
And what
trace.
about
No
Muslims?
trace.
Is there anything Muslim there?
No, but
No.
one has heard stories recently of Christian missionaries
Going up,
being
but I
based
haven't
in Ask Sujata.
But I
Being
don't think they
based
made any
in
inroad.
Pio, who are Pio, who are
Yes, yes, you are trying to
converting.
convert.
Yeah, who are converting, she said. She gave us names.
Yeah.
And,
But it'll be
it's
1, 2
very,
families
very
somewhere
limited.
who will
now.
get, sometimes because the attraction of very good schooling at no cost is very high in these belts. That you get this, quality education in English medium school at
So they're
zero
still
cost.
Jesuits then? It's mainly Jesuits?
The original, the original people who went into this belt into Western Tibet were Jesuits, 16th, 17th century, 17th century. But there's no real trace of them. Finished.
Yeah, we
The
watched
Moravians
him-
have left windows, glass they brought, and this, what we call the Lahal socks, which in Himachal are called the Lahal socks.
and their
This
clothes
particular way of weaving this,
Knitting,
and the Lahal dress.
dress with rick-rack on it. I mean, it's so
Oh,
strange
rick-rack.
to see rick-rack
So the
along.
Moravians left these signs.
Very interesting.
Very interesting sort of.
And now, what about peaks? You must have seen Rangrikaran, Kinnaur, Kailash, Jorkand, and which are the other peaks you have seen, observed?
Fuararang,
Avararang, yes.
Manerang,
lovely. It is so
Manirang, yeah.
beautiful.
Manerang is
Manirang in Spiti is so beautiful.
Chow Chow Kangilda.
Then
Any legend
Yannelda.
stories shared with this Avararang and other peaks?
Fuararang has some stories of shepherds. I forget the details, but it does have. It does have from Shooting Ting, because you see it right above you and it has some stories attached to it. I forget the stories now.
And the Rangrikaran and Charangompa,
Yeah, Charangumpa has some fine stories
what would be anything
about
you
someone
recall?
trying to. There's a story about thieves coming to the Rangritungma temple in Charang and how this horrendous noise was set up and they got scared and ran away. I forget the details. I think I've written it down somewhere, that story. I have it in writing somewhere. It's a very nice, very interesting story about the glacier and how the sounds make the thieves run away.
And we could hear in spring when we were in Kalpa, we
Yeah,
could hear
avalanches.
the avalanches sort of moving above Raleigh, glacier. The Raleigh glacier.
Avalanche.
And there are times we've seen it just come across and block the entire Sutlej, and the Sutlej is flowing from the middle. And you could actually sort of walk across that not little, but
Yeah, big
Yeah,
sort of
they were-
avalanche cones. Huge.
so many interesting stories about that.
Yeah, so there are stories about every temple, about every area, and how much of it will get preserved is difficult to say.
Is there
Of course,
any
the
written
Tibet,
idea?
as you know, the Kinnaur gods had oral histories, which were called Chirunangs.
Chirunang.
Chirunang. So every god had or goddess would have a story of his or her origin, where they came from, how they established, what kind of wars they fought or relationships they had, and this would be on the occasion, on the festive occasions, the oracle would recite this.
It's still known. I
The
mean,
Chirunang would be recited in a language which most people did not understand.
but still, I mean, this tradition continues. Are they there in any language? Are they
The
there?
oracles are finishing. The Groch, as the Groch they were called. It's a hard life. People don't want it. So the mediums are going. So the oral histories are vanishing. I started a process of writing them now and recording them. So we wrote 3 or 4 when I was moved out. We'd written 3 or 4 down. So we had started documenting.
So these oracles are now no longer.
There are very few left. I haven't heard of any.
And what is the
lately.
language that they?
They will speak some very ancient language because it really goes back. So even modern day Kinnauri would be different from that. So very interesting how they would sort of have their conversations and
Do you think it's now? What do you look for the modern Kinnaur? You think things are
modern
changed,
Kinnaur
changing?
is merging with mainstream India and the world.
Oh yeah, we
I
went
mean,
to this village called Rogi.
I must tell you, when I first visited Boston in 2005, I went to a restaurant to have dinner, which belonged to a friend of mine, and the steward in the restaurant was a Kinnaura.
Wow.
Negi.
So you can imagine he was a Negi.
Yes.
So if that's the way the world is changing already. So
And Kinnaur historically has had people. The first chief secretary of Himachal was Kinnaur.
yeah,
Yes,
not the
Negi.
first, but
Okay.
one of the chief
Was
secretaries. Yeah.
Kinnaur. Kinnaur has had people have moved out for education outside of the area. They are exposed to new ideas,
batteries.
new
I don't forget that.
battery low, critically low. So Kinnaur hasn't been that,
It's a prosperous
insular.
area.
Yeah.
It's never been, as you said, it's never been one thing. And now it's prosperous. It's beyond one thing.
Oh, and we've seen changes, talking about changes. I mean, we went for Raju, who was Deepak's gunman, his wedding, and that was completely in the traditional style. The gifts that were.
Okay.
Who's it?
Okay, so now I think let's
Kona
now
hai?
we are end of
Tempted to have
show.
one.
So now let's take a
Yeah.
break here.
With?
So let's take a break here. We have finished with Kinnaur. And now whatever rest, we'll wrap it up after your call.
Yes.